Only flies landed on her skin. No one made a single offer, until a human saw her true worth and paid. The sign above the docking bay read Last Chance Exchanges, though time and corrosion had claimed most of the letters. What remained hung crooked on rusted brackets. The words faded into a dull memory of legitimacy. Zyra Station, once a mining logistics hub orbiting the stripped husk of a dead moon, now served a simpler purpose, offloading anything the core systems didn't want to see. Inside the auction dome, the air was heavy with heat and disuse. The faint hiss of faulty oxygen filters warred with the buzz of exposed plasma welds. Overhead, patchwork glass let in the distant burn of a dying sun, its light fractured into pale shafts across the cracked floor. The scent was a suffocating blend of scorched wiring, sweat, oil, and the faint copper tang of old blood. Morgan adjusted the strap of his satchel, his long coat brushing the edge of a scorched bench as he stepped past a cluster of traders gnawing on skewered meat. His boots clicked against warped plating. The auction was ending. Most of the cages had been cleared, vacant now, their former occupants loaded into transports, sold off for parts or worse. Then he saw her. She was barely visible in the shadows at the far end of the dome, chained to a floor ring bolt, as if even the cage wasn't worth fully locking anymore. Her knees were pulled to her chest, shoulders hunched, her long white hair tangled and stuck to her blue-gray skin. Flies circled lazily around her, landing undisturbed on the oozing wounds that marred her back. No one even looked at her. Not anymore. And yet, Morgan froze mid-step. There it was. Not a signal. Not a sound. Something older. Instinctive. His eyes locked on the mark seared into her shoulder, partially obscured by grime and blood, but unmistakable in form. A curved glyph, delicate as a crescent, interlaced with lines like a falling star. Salar, a dialect so old, no living AI could translate it. Banned. Forgotten. Erased. His pulse kicked hard against his ribs. The auctioneer caught his gaze and snorted. Still here, Professor? There's nothing left worth your kind of credits. Morgan didn't answer. He stepped toward the cage, each footfall echoing louder in his chest than in the room. She's unsellable, the man continued, gesturing with a half-smoked stim stick. Falsified logs. No species match. Doesn't speak. Barely breathes. Flies love her, though. The other traders chuckled. One leaned back, eyeing Morgan with a smirk. You gonna take her home and archive her, scholar? Frame her next to your fossils. He ignored them. Up close now, the damage was worse. Her skin was cracked, mottled like stone, as if she'd once glowed and had that glow scorched out. The wounds on her back weren't just cuts. They were layered over older scars, as if she'd been branded and rebranded, over and over again. A cruel palimpsest. She didn't look at him, didn't flinch when the flies scattered as his shadow crossed her. Didn't move at all. For a moment, he saw her not as an artifact or a proof of concept, but as someone beyond even recognition. A thing the galaxy had decided no longer mattered. A lost truth still breathing. I'll take her, Morgan said quietly. The auctioneer blinked. You what? I'll take her. The traders burst into laughter. One tossed a chicken bone toward the cage. We were just joking, right? Morgan didn't look away. Transfer the credits. You're serious? The auctioneer scratched the side of his jaw. She's yours, I guess. Don't blame me if she dies on the way out. Breathing corpse, that one. The transaction pinged. Confirmed. The lock on the cage disengaged with a groan like an old grave opening. Morgan stepped inside. She didn't react. Not when he crouched. Not when he placed his coat gently over her shoulders. The fabric fell across her fragile frame, too large, but clean and warm. Still nothing. He didn't touch her skin, just sat beside her in silence. The wound on her back pulsed once, dark and wet. A fly landed near the edge of the brand. He waved it away. From somewhere beneath her curtain of hair, a sound escaped. Not a word, a breath with weight. Then a whisper, dry, barely formed, but unmistakable. A word in Salar. The last time Morgan had heard that language spoken, it had been reconstructed from broken stone tablets, voices simulated by AI in sterile labs. But now, here, the word carried meaning. It had weight. Her lips moved again, as if trying to remember how to speak at all. Then she slumped forward. Morgan caught her before her head hit the floor, his arms looping around her almost without thought. Her body was lighter than it should have been. Starvation. Nerve damage. He adjusted her weight carefully and stood. Behind him, the traders had returned to their drinks and murmured jokes. But one voice cut through them, low and sharp. "Does this mean we can't have our turn anymore?" Morgan turned his head slightly. He didn't speak, but he memorized that voice. Then he walked out of the auction dome. She didn't stir in his arms. Her breath was shallow, too slow. His pulse kept time for both of them as he carried her through the grim corridors of Zyra Station, past blinking consoles and empty promises. As the station doors hissed shut behind them, he looked down at her face. Long white lashes, skin that shimmered faintly, even through grime and bruises. She was no relic, no salvage. She was history the galaxy tried to bury. And Morgan Meyer, exiled academic, discarded historian, hadn't just uncovered a forgotten page. For the first time, he had touched a living story. He whispered, almost to himself, as the door to his ship opened, "I didn't buy you to study you. I bought you to save you." She didn't answer. But as the lights of the station faded behind them, a single line haunted him. The Solara left no voice recordings. Their language was erased, their songs silenced before the war even ended. And yet, a moment ago, someone had spoken again. One word, spoken through cracked lips. And she had survived long enough to say it. Morgan held her closer, his jaw set. He didn't yet know who she was. Didn't know what the word meant. But he would learn. And this time, no one would silence her again. The door hissed shut behind them with a faint hydraulic sigh, sealing out the filth and noise of Zyra Station. Inside the ship, the air was filtered and clean, though tinged with the faint, familiar scent of ink, old textiles, and recycled coolant. An odd kind of comfort Morgan had grown used to. He carried her carefully through the narrow corridor, past rows of storage shelves lined with data pads, fossilized scrolls, and bits of shattered pottery. His ship wasn't a war vessel or a transport hauler. It was a floating archive, part field lab, part mobile sanctuary. It wasn't built for comfort, but it was safe and warm. The woman in his arms made no sound. Her body was still too light, too stiff, like she didn't quite believe she was out of the cage yet. As if any moment, the light would shift, the air would change, and she'd be dragged back into darkness. He settled her into the med bay's padded recliner, a salvaged piece from an old exploration craft, worn but functional. Her head lolled to the side. The coat he'd wrapped around her slipped slightly, revealing a dark welt running across her ribs. He winced. Morgan stepped back and activated the low-level diagnostics on the wall. It hummed to life, casting a soft blue glow over her skin. Readings blinked in a quiet pattern. Dehydration, malnutrition, superficial lacerations, decreased neural activity, blood pressure just barely holding. She wouldn't last another rotation without intervention. He moved quickly and without fanfare. Rehydration gel, synth protein solution, mild to avoid shock. A portable warming pad beneath her spine. Nothing invasive. Nothing that might make her feel restrained. The auto-patcher hissed, sealing one of the deeper cuts on her arm. She twitched, just slightly, but didn't wake. Morgan exhaled slowly, his pulse still high, his thoughts already spiraling toward what he'd done. He'd never rescued anyone before. Never bought a living being. Never crossed the line between observation and action. But back in that dome, something ancient had stirred in him. Not academic, not logical. It was a gut-deep recognition. She wasn't just a remnant. She was the Solar. And something about the way she hadn't begged or looked away, something about the way she simply endured, that had done it. Broken something in him. Or maybe rebuilt it. His hand hovered briefly above hers. Then stopped. No contact. Not unless she asked. He turned, moved to the small galley, and retrieved a thermal cup of broth. Not too hot. Just warm enough to settle in a hollow stomach. When he returned, she had shifted. Her eyes were open. Barely. Amber, shot through with gold veins. Still dull from pain, but aware now. Watching, he crouched beside her again, this time setting the cup down within reach. "You're safe," he said softly. "You're not on Zyra anymore." She didn't blink. Her gaze stayed locked on him, unmoving. "I'm Morgan," he added, speaking with the same calm tone he used when addressing ancient ruins. "I'm a historian. I study lost cultures. I saw your mark, the glyph on your shoulder." Still no response, but her fingers twitched once. A small, involuntary motion, like memory stirring beneath the surface. "I'm not here to study you," he clarified. "I didn't buy you to own you." A pause. "I just couldn't leave you there." Nothing in her expression changed, but her breath came in just slightly deeper. He stood again, giving her space. "I'm gonna leave the door open," he said. "No locks. No cameras. This is your room now. If you're hungry, the broth's there. If you want help, just call me." He left the medbay door partially open and stepped into the corridor, the weight of what he just said pressing down on him. Back in the cockpit, he slumped into the pilot's seat, elbows on knees, staring out at the stars through the viewport. The engines hummed softly beneath his feet. Steady. Reliable. What the hell had he done? It had been years since anyone called him impulsive. He wasn't a rescuer. He was a man who read ruins and deciphered dialects. But something about her, that brand, that one whispered word in a language no one had spoken aloud in over a century. She'd spoken Salar, not mimicked it, spoken it, with rhythm, with intent. And now she was lying in his ship, silent and broken, barely breathing. He rubbed a hand across his face, then reached for the recording pad beside him and clicked it on. "Entry 417, he said, voice quieter than usual. "Subject acquired at Zyra Auction Dome. Possible Solar survivor. Confirmed brand in royal dialect. Archaic variant. Language recognition suggests authentic fluency. Will monitor vitals and behavioral patterns. She has not spoken again since boarding." He stopped the recording, stared at the blinking cursor. "She's more than a subject," he muttered under his breath. Then he stood again. He made himself wait a full hour before returning to the medbay. She hadn't touched the broth, but she was sitting up now, hunched as if she might still bolt at any moment, but awake. Awake and watching him with those cautious, gold-flecked eyes. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said, keeping his tone gentle. "If you don't want me to talk, I won't. Just wanted to check on you." She said nothing, but her gaze flicked to the cup, then back to him. He didn't move, didn't urge her. A long moment passed. Then, with hands that shook slightly, she reached for the broth, brought it to her lips. The first sip was small. She paused, waited, then another, and another. Halfway through the cup, her shoulders trembled. She stopped drinking and lowered the cup. Her breath caught. Morgan thought for a second she might be choking, but then saw the wet streak on her cheek. Not choking, crying. Silently, but fully. He didn't move. She stared at the cup like it had betrayed her. Then she looked up at him, really looked. Not with fear, not with suspicion, with confusion, as if she couldn't quite understand why she was still alive. Why anyone had given her something warm. Morgan swallowed hard. "You're not alone anymore," he said. She didn't answer, but she didn't look away. Not this time. And that, he knew, was the beginning of something fragile. Something real. Something neither of them had expected. Out in the void, his ship sailed quietly between stars. Inside, the silence wasn't empty anymore. Morgan found her standing. She was at the far end of the med bay, spine drawn taut as if waiting to be struck, one hand resting lightly against the curved wall. Her fingers explored it like she didn't trust the surface to stay still. She was still wrapped in his coat, though it hung off her thin frame in loose folds, the sleeves dragging slightly at the ends. Her bare feet stood flat against the polished floor, and for a second, she didn't notice he was watching. She wasn't looking for a way out. She was listening. The faint hum of the ship's core engine vibrated through the hull. Every whisper of circuitry, every pulse of the life support grid. She seemed to map it all through her body. Morgan didn't move. If he startled her now, he didn't know what she'd do. Then she spoke. Quiet. Not to him. Not even to herself. To the ship. A machine that breathes. Her voice had a rough and used edge to it, like broken silk. But the pronunciation was precise, syllables deliberate, and the language wasn't common. Not trade, not anything on record. He caught the rhythm immediately. Solar. Morgan stepped forward slowly, just enough to make the floor creak. She turned at the sound. Her expression didn't change. No surprise, no fear. Just a weary kind of awareness, as if bracing for whatever came next. I didn't mean to disturb you, he said gently. I came to check your vitals. You already did, she answered. He blinked. Her voice was stronger now, though still low and used. There was weight behind it. Not because she wanted to speak, but because she decided to. You knew I was awake? I heard you breathe. Morgan nodded slowly. I see. She tilted her head. You always speak like that. Like what? Like you're brushing dust off your words before using them. A flicker of something passed between them, dry, brittle, but almost humorous. The corner of his mouth lifted. Bad habit. She turned her gaze back to the wall. You're not like the others. I try not to be. She looked at him again, sharper this time. Then why did you pay for me? He didn't answer right away. There were too many versions of the truth. He could say it was the glyph, the brand on her shoulder that matched a forbidden dialect he'd once risked his career to prove existed. He could say it was the whispered words she'd spoken in that cage, or the fact that no one else had even looked at her as a person. But none of that was the whole answer. Because you were being erased, he said finally. And I've spent my life trying to keep people like you from disappearing. She didn't blink. Not just your body, he added. Your language. Your history. You said something in Solar when I found you. Do you remember? She nodded once. What did it mean? She took a long moment before answering. It's a name. Yours. No. A title. For someone who is lost, but not gone. He let that settle. That's poetic. It's who I was supposed to become. Were you royalty? He asked gently. A pause. Then, with no inflection, once. It wasn't boastful. It wasn't tragic. Just a shard of something buried under ash. Morgan crossed to the terminal and dimmed the lights slightly. She didn't react to the change, but her shoulders dropped half an inch. He noticed. Would you like something to eat? He asked. No. But her voice faltered. He didn't push. Do you remember your name? He asked instead. She hesitated. Then quietly no. Morgan didn't write it down. He didn't record the conversation. He just stood there and nodded. Would you like to use mine? He asked. She looked up at him again, this time really seeing him. You're offering your name to a stranger? It's just a name, he said, but it's a start. He meant it as a bridge. She took it as something more. She didn't say yes, didn't even nod, but she took a step toward him. Just one, and the distance between them shrank by more than meters. Morgan took a slow breath. He gestured toward the corridor. I'm heading to the galley. You don't have to join me, but there's fresh cloth and water in the hygiene station if you want to. I know what it's for. Her voice cut him off, not sharp but decisive. Then she added, quieter, I haven't used one in, I don't know, take your time. He turned to leave, but paused at the threshold. Some parts of this ship are old, he said. They creak when they shift, especially when we break orbit. Don't be alarmed. It's not failing, it's just remembering. She said nothing, but he thought he saw her eyes soften. Later, as he sat in the galley nursing a bitter cup of synth coffee, the sound of water running through the pipes echoed faintly overhead. He set the mug down and leaned forward, elbows on the table, staring at the faint reflection of the light above. She was washing. Not because she had to, because she chose to. He didn't go to her. He didn't need to. Not yet. For now, the sound of running water was enough. A small declaration of life. And somewhere, maybe even of trust, the stars outside turned in patient silence, visible through the narrow pane of the cockpit. Inside, the dimmed lights had settled into their evening cycle, a soft amber glow, calm and low. Morgan sat in the pilot's chair, not piloting, just thinking. His hands were folded in his lap. His eyes drifted occasionally to the console, then to the empty co-pilot's seat beside him, until it wasn't empty anymore. Saradian stepped inside barefoot, her presence quiet but steady. Her long white hair hung damp down her back, glimmering faintly against her fresh clothes, soft, gray fabric from his emergency stores, still too loose on her small frame. She didn't speak. She just looked at the seat, then at him. And when he gave the slightest nod, she sat. Not cautiously, not like someone testing a cage, like someone returning to somewhere they weren't sure they'd ever be allowed again. "I remember my name," she said. Morgan turned, his breath catching slightly, not from surprise but from how she said it. Not with hesitation, with ownership. "I'm Zyra of Halvareth," she said, "daughter of the line singer Kirithel and the reader Valen, last bearer of the House of Breath." The cockpit went still. Morgan had spent his academic life chasing fragments of those names. Valen's glyph had been etched into the floor of a ruined dome on Ankaris Prime. Kirithel's name appeared once in a disputed archival fragment, dismissed as poetic metaphor. But here they were, real, spoken aloud by the only person left who could say them with memory in her voice. "Halvareth," he said slowly, "that city was never found, not even a single wall stone." "Because it wasn't made of stone," she replied. "It was built into the living cliffside of Irel's spine. Our walls were grown, not carved. Our homes sang when the wind passed through them." She looked toward the window. Her voice lost some of its edge, softened into something almost reverent. You could stand on a balcony and feel the breath of the planet in your ribs. That was the rhythm our language followed. Not breath against teeth like yours. Ours flowed from diaphragm, throat, then air. Like tide, like heat. Morgan listened, every word sinking into the marrow of his mind. "I studied your language," he said, "for years. I tried to reconstruct its phonetics, but no AI, no linguistic grid, could make sense of it." Zyra gave a small nod. "Because it wasn't meant to be written. It was meant to be lived." Then, after a pause, she added, "And because they erased it. Not just the words. The context. The emotion. They thought by deleting our recordings, they deleted the code." "But you still remember it," he said. "I remember the shape of it in my lungs." He swallowed hard. "Then why didn't you speak it at all? Why only in the auction hall?" Zyra's eyes darkened slightly, not with anger, but memory. "In the holding facility, I was taught common," she said. "Not by teachers. By commands. Warnings. Orders barked over loudspeakers. Obey. Comply. Eat. Kneel." She looked down at her hands. They were folded in her lap. Still. Composed. "I never spoke it. Not once. Not even when they shocked me. Because if I spoke it, it meant I accepted their rules. That their language had power over mine." Morgan's voice was barely audible. "But with me, you did." She didn't respond immediately. Then she looked over at him, eyes gold-flecked and steady. "Because you didn't ask me to. You gave me space. Silence. And when you said your name, I remembered how to say mine." They sat that way for a long time. The console hummed quietly. Finally, Morgan asked, "Do you want to know who I was?" Zyra tilted her head slightly. "You still are someone. I see in how your hands move. Slow. Careful. You're used to preserving delicate things." He smiled, just a flicker. "I was a xenocultural historian. Eller academic sphere. I published a paper defending the Solar people's historic legitimacy. They called it falsified. Said I invented your glyph structure to discredit the Union. They exiled you," she said, more observation than question. "They erased my credentials. Froze my grants. My students were reassigned. One of them even testified against me." His voice wasn't bitter, just hollow. "I spent the last 9 years drifting between forgotten systems, chasing artifacts no one wanted, decoding symbols no one believed were real. Until me. Until you." Another silence. This one wasn't empty. It was full of something fragile and terrifying. Recognition. Zyra shifted slightly in her seat, turning to face him. Her posture was upright, almost regal again, like muscle memory returning. "I've been touched 1,000 times," she said, her voice low. "Grabbed, bound, inspected. Always without permission. Always with purpose." Morgan didn't move. "But no one ever just offered." She reached out, slow and deliberate, and placed her hand over his. Not trembling, not testing, just being. His fingers curled lightly under hers. He said nothing, because nothing was needed. Her touch wasn't about comfort. It was about presence. And for the first time, Saradian wasn't reclaiming her past. She was claiming her present. When Morgan finally spoke, it was barely a whisper. "Thank you for trusting me." Her fingers tightened gently. "I don't. Not fully," she said. Then, softer. "But I want to." The light dimmed another notch, the ship entering night mode. Outside, space turned quietly. Inside, a woman who had been silenced began to speak. And a man who had spent his life listening finally heard something worth holding on to. Not data, not language, a voice, alive, and choosing to stay. The alarm started as a soft pulse, barely audible over the hum of the ship's systems, then escalated into a crisp, urgent chime that echoed through the corridor like a heartbeat spiking. Morgan was already on his feet before the alert fully engaged. He moved fast, every step controlled, the motion of someone who'd lived too long expecting the worst behind every unexpected signal. Saradian was close behind him. She didn't ask what was happening. She already knew. He reached the bridge console and scanned the readouts. "Scavenger ping," he said. "Small patrol ship, no transponder, approaching Vector 10. They're not broadcasting, either pirates or slavers." Saradian stood silent at his shoulder, eyes narrowed. "They followed us?" she asked. "Unlikely. We've been running dark since Zyra, but it's a known trade route. We're not the only thing worth stripping out here. Unless they scanned for Solar biosignatures." Morgan hesitated. "That shouldn't be possible. I've scrambled our heat trace. Your vitals are masked." "They've found us before," she said, voice flat. The screen lit up with proximity data. The ship, sleek, narrow, meant for pursuit, was closing the gap fast. Too fast to outrun with the sublight engines. Morgan made a decision. "We're not fighting," he said. "Not with what we have. Strap in." He slammed the console, redirecting the auxiliary power to shields and jamming, while Saradian dropped into the co-pilot chair beside him. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Dropping into the lower atmosphere of Sarva 9. Thin air, toxic without filtration, but enough drag to make them think twice about following." "Will it work?" "No," he said, flicking a switch, "but it'll buy us 5 minutes." The ship groaned as it descended, systems straining against the sudden pull of gravity and pressure. The view outside turned amber, then darkened, dust storms and static clouds swallowing the stars. The pirate ship held distance for a moment, unsure. Then it opened fire. The first hit was glancing, clipped the port stabilizer. The next one would be fatal. Morgan's hands moved fast, but his breath came shallow. They weren't going to make it out clean. Not this time. Saradian leaned forward. "Give me control of the comm array," she said. "What? What?" "I have one last language left." He didn't understand, but he did it. She activated the array, closed her eyes, and spoke. The sound wasn't Solar. It wasn't common. It was guttural, pulsing, rhythmic, like bone drums wrapped in electricity. Morgan felt the sound before he understood it. Something ancient. A field frequency coded into her voice. A sonic command laced with historical resonance, designed not to destroy, but to warn. The pirate ship veered off, not because of the sound itself, but because something in it triggered recognition. The transmission ended. Saradian sagged in her chair. Morgan caught her arm instinctively. "What did you just do?" "I spoke in the voice of their ancestral fear," she said. The Solar once encoded cultural kill switches into auditory fields. Warnings, taboos, religious boundaries. Old empires remember them in their bones, even if they don't know why. He stared at her. "You weaponized memory." "I survived it. I may as well use it." Morgan exhaled, slow and shaky. They floated now, hidden under a static layer of Sarvan's atmosphere. Safe for the moment. She was pale, exhausted, but upright, grounded. He turned to her. "You didn't have to do that." "I did. You could have died." "And if I did?" she asked, her tone neutral. Morgan looked at her, searching her face. "Then everything I've fought for, everything I believed in, would have died with you." Something flickered across her expression. A tightening of her jaw. A soft inhale. "I don't want to be someone's symbol, Morgan." You're not. Then what am I to you? He didn't look away. You're the first person who ever made me stop chasing the past, he said, and start wanting a future. Silence expanded between them. Thick. Electric. Saradian didn't speak. Instead, she stood, stepped closer, and looked him dead in the eye. Her breath was steady. Her voice quiet. I haven't been touched without pain in decades. Morgan didn't reach for her. He just stood there, arms at his sides, letting her choose. She reached for him. Not a desperate clutch. Not a test. A decision. Her fingers slid along his jaw, her hand resting against his face, her thumb brushing the edge of his cheekbone. He closed his eyes. The kiss came slowly, gentle, weighted, a meeting of scar and solace. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. When they pulled apart, her eyes were clearer, her breath deeper. I'm not healed, she said. I'm not whole, he answered. Then maybe, she said, we could be something together. And outside, the storm raged on. But inside, for the first time, they weren't just surviving. They were beginning. The silence that followed their escape from the Union Patrol was heavy, not from dread, but from something unspoken between them. The cockpit lights had dimmed again, casting them both in warm shadows. Morgan's hands hovered near the controls, but there was nothing more to pilot. They were safe for now, tucked inside a pocket of dead space beneath the magnetic veil of Sarvan IX's outer storm band. Saradian sat beside him, her breathing calm, eyes fixed on the dark beyond the viewport. Not watching for danger, just being. Her fingers, pale blue with a soft iridescence, rested loosely on her lap. For the first time, they weren't clenched. I've never seen anyone fly like that, she said softly, without turning. Morgan let out a slow breath. I've had a lot of practice. Running. A faint smile touched the corner of her mouth. You run like someone who still believes there's something worth reaching. He didn't answer right away. Outside, lightning flickered deep in the atmosphere, casting the interior of the cockpit in brief flashes of silver. We survived, he said, almost himself. Again, Saradian shifted to face him. That wasn't just survival, Morgan. You protected me. When you could have run. When you should have. His gaze drifted toward her, slowly, like he couldn't quite believe she was real. You saved me, he said. That signal you sent, those weren't just words. That was a warning carried in blood memory. They ran because something in them remembered what your people once meant. She looked down for a moment. It wasn't power. It was legacy. Pain, inherited and repurposed. Morgan nodded, then turned her fully. You didn't have to use it. Yes, I did. You could have died. She looked at him. Eyes steady. So could you. Something in the quiet that followed shifted. Not dramatically. Not all at once. Just enough to close the last distance between them that words could no longer fill. Morgan stood and extended a hand to her. Come with me. Saradian took it. They walked through the corridor without speaking, the floor beneath them humming with a pulse of stabilizers and redirected heat coils. The ship was old, yes, but it was theirs now, shared space born from trust rather than necessity. He led her past the galley, through the main archive chamber, to the small observation deck, a curved dome of reinforced transparent steel that opened toward the stars. The lights dimmed automatically behind them. Just the two of them now, backlit by constellations neither could name. She stepped forward and pressed her palm to the glass, feeling the faint coolness through her skin. I used to dream of this, she said. Stars without chains. Silence without dread. Morgan stood beside her. And now, she turned to him, her voice a whisper. Now I don't dream. I choose. There was no hesitation in how she reached for him. She touched his cheek first, curious and reverent, like rediscovering something sacred. He didn't move, didn't speak. His breath caught slightly when her fingers brushed the line of his jaw, then traveled slowly to rest at the back of his neck. Then she kissed him. It wasn't urgent. It didn't need to be. The intensity was in its control, in the way her lips shaped themselves to his like they belonged there. Morgan responded with the same care, one hand moving to her waist, the other brushing through her long white hair as though memorizing the feel of her. When they parted, her forehead remained against his. Their breaths mingled in the narrow space between them. I don't know how to love without pain, she said. You don't have to, Morgan replied. You just have to start with presence. She closed her eyes. Then stay. Here, with me. I wasn't planning on going anywhere. He felt her exhale, a long, slow surrender of something she'd held inside for too many years. Sarah Deanne leaned back just enough to look into his eyes. There's something I didn't tell you. What is it? When we transmitted that pulse, someone responded. Morgan stiffened. Union. She shook her head. No. Older. Hidden. One of my mother's people. Vena. My aunt. His breath caught. She's alive. She found us. Or maybe she was always watching, waiting for the right moment. Morgan took that in with a slow nod. Does she want you to leave with her? I don't know yet, Sardian said. But I do know this. She kept a vault. A real one. Not just memory. Continuance. The last life seed of my people. Untouched. Waiting for me. And what do you want to do? She stepped closer again, laying her hand over his chest. I want to plant something that isn't just survival. Morgan covered her hand with his. Then we go together. Her voice trembled slightly, but not with fear. With something else. If we claim the seed, if I bond with it, it chooses lineage. The future it encodes won't just carry my blood. His eyes searched hers. I understand, he said. Do you? She asked gently. Morgan cupped her face in both hands. Sarah Deanne, I don't want a monument. I don't want a relic. I want a life. With you. And if that life carries forward in any form, it'll be because we built it together. Not because of history. Because of choice. She closed her eyes and leaned into his touch. Then come with me. Claim a seed. And claim me. He kissed her again, longer this time. Deeper. Not just need, not even hope, but certainty. Later, they lay together beneath the window of the ship. Her skin, warm against his, shimmered faintly in the starlight. His hand traced the shape of her spine slowly, as though each vertebra was a new constellation to remember. They didn't speak much after that. They didn't need to. In that silence, trust became truth, and truth became a beginning. Together, they set course for the vault. Not because they had to, but because love, real love, doesn't erase the past. It chooses a future. The landing was quiet. No fanfare. No waiting crowds. Just the sound of landing struts locking into place and the faint hiss of atmosphere equalizing as Morgan powered down the ship. The world below them was small, unnamed, and hidden, tucked between the ragged folds of collapsed star maps and long-erased charts. It didn't appear on any Union registry. No patrols. No satellites. Just oxygen, gravity, and silence. That was what made it perfect. Morgan stood at the edge of the ramp as it extended, breathing in air that was clean and alive with the scent of wet leaves and ancient soil. A shallow valley stretched out below the ridge. Mist drifted low across the ground, clinging to strange ferns and brittle-bark trees with silver veins that shimmered faintly under the morning light. Sarah Deanne stepped beside him, wrapped in a shawl woven from fiber Morgan couldn't identify. Not scavenged, not synthetic, something grown, something hers. Her white hair moved gently in the breeze, and her amber eyes reflected the soft light like they were made of something older than the sky itself. This place remembers, she said softly. Morgan looked at her. You've been here before? She shook her head. No, but something solar seeded it long ago. The resonance lives in the plants. The soil holds our frequency. You can feel that. She turned to him and smiled. Not the ghost of one, not a flicker. A real, full smile. I am that. He didn't respond. He didn't need to. He followed her. They moved through the trees, slowly. Sarah Deanne's fingers brushed each branch and leaf as they passed. Not harvesting, not disturbing, just acknowledging. And as they reached a rise in the valley, a thin column of glass emerged from the overgrown slope. Smooth, seamless, untouched by time or weather. Buried until now. A vault. She knelt at its base, palms pressed flat against the soil. Then she began to hum. Not a melody, not a song, a frequency. Morgan felt it more than he heard it, like his bones remembered it before his ears could. The column pulsed once with pale light. Then again, the ground beneath them shifted with a soft sigh. The vault opened, not violently, not with defense measures or technological flair. With invitation. Inside, light filtered through crystalline panels that responded to her presence. Glyphs illuminated in sequence. Data patterns spun slowly, coalescing into language, then fading. This was a seed vault, but not of weapons or command codes. Of culture. She walked ahead of him, reading everything. Glyphs that had no human translation. Images that pulsed with memory. Her hands passed over rows of suspended biocapsules, plant genomes, textile memory weaves, fragments of recorded solar sensory history encoded not in text, but in temperature, sound, and pressure. Her people had never stored information the way others did. They felt it into being, and here it still was. Morgan stared in awe. This is... She turned. Home. He stepped closer. You knew this would be here? I hoped, she said. I followed the field imprint. You followed me. And the vault followed the name I remembered. Zyra reached to the center console and pressed her palm to the activation seal. It lit up in a slow pulse, syncing with her breath. A clear orb rose from the center, smooth and alive with inner motion. It glowed faintly with gold and pale blue threads of energy swirling within. What is it? Morgan asked. The last heirloom, she whispered. Solar life seed. A vessel of choice. He frowned. Choice. Our kind didn't reproduce by cycle. We chose. When the glyphs aligned, history, mind, bond, then we passed it on. Not obligation. Consent. Every generation had to be willed into being. She turned, placing the orb into his hands. It was warm. You found me in ruin, she said. You gave me silence when I needed it. Space when I feared it. Language when I thought I'd lost mine. You didn't rebuild me. Morgan's voice was hushed. No. You reminded me I was whole. He held the orb, stunned. And this, what are you asking? I'm not asking, she said. I'm offering. He looked up, stunned by the weight of it. Not just what she meant, but what she was. Not a relic. Not a rescue. A partner. I don't want to bury the past, she said. I want to plant it. They stood in the heart of a forgotten world, surrounded by the unspoken history of a people who had refused to vanish. Zyra stepped closer, placing her hands over his. I want to build something new. With you. Not because you saved me. Not because I owe you. But because you see me. As I am. Morgan's throat tightened. He didn't speak. He kissed her. This time it wasn't cautious. It was full, grounded, and sure. Outside, the mist had begun to rise, curling in gentle waves through the valley as if the planet itself was exhaling. Later, they would begin cataloging, building, learning what the Solar had left behind and what they could carry forward. But not yet. For now, they stood together in the middle of something not lost, but returned. He looked at her, the woman the galaxy had thrown away. She looked at him, the man who chose to see what no one else would. And in that moment, the last daughter of the Solar was no longer alone. She was chosen, and choosing. Together, they stepped into the light of their own beginning. Not an echo of the past, but a new story, rooted in memory, grown from trust, and alive with love. The soil was warm beneath their feet. They had walked the vault fields for hours, weaving through the whispering grasses and flowering glyph vines that curled up around their boots like threads remembering footsteps. Morgan carried the life seed in a reinforced pouch against his chest, one hand resting over it without thinking, as if the orb had already begun to sync with the rhythm of his heartbeat. Zyra walked beside him, not behind, not ahead. Beside, her hand brushed his now and then, lightly, as though reminding them both that this was real, that they were still here. The sun, low and bronze on the horizon, cast golden light through the valley. The mist had thinned, lifting to reveal the gentle curve of the terrain and the half-buried structures scattered across it, forgotten sanctuaries, waiting. They paused near one of them, a shallow stone hollow framed by vine-covered pillars. She stepped in first, her body silhouetted by the light. The moment felt like something ancient, something sacred. Here, she said, her voice soft but sure. This is where it should begin. Morgan followed her into the circle. The air was cooler beneath the stone, scented with moss and something sweet he couldn't name. The wind barely reached them here. It was still, listening. He stepped behind her and rested the orb in her hands. Zyra looked down at it. This small, glowing core that held the encoded memory of a people who'd refused extinction. You could still leave, she said quietly. You've done what no one else would. You brought me home. Morgan stepped closer, close enough that his breath stirred her hair. I didn't come this far to walk away. Her hands closed around the orb, cradling it as if it were something living. When she turned to face him, her expression had changed. Not hardened, not softened, but deepened. Like the ocean just before it reveals the reef below. You've seen everything, she said. Every scar, every silence, every cracked word I've stitched back into a sentence. I saw you, he said, and I didn't look away. Her breath caught. Not once. Zyra lifted her hand slowly and touched his face, his cheek, his jaw, her fingers mapping him as if committing him to memory not with her eyes, but her skin. Then she leaned in and kissed him. Not a tentative kiss, not the kiss of someone unsure, but the kiss of a woman who had been silent for years and had finally remembered how to speak with her whole self. His arms wrapped around her instinctively, pulling her closer. She melted into him with a quiet sigh, not of surrender, but of arrival. She tasted like the air of her home world, cool, floral, grounding. And when she kissed him again, it was slower, deeper. Her fingers slipped into his hair, pulling him toward her like she was anchoring herself to something that wouldn't vanish at dawn. The kiss broke. Barely. Only enough for her to whisper, lips brushing his. I never thought I belonged to anyone but history. You don't belong to history, he said. You are it. And now you're writing the next part. Her smile returned, quiet and knowing. She kissed him again, a softer touch this time. On his cheek, his temple, the corner of his mouth. Little marks of reverence, of certainty. He lowered his forehead to hers. We could stay here, he said. Not hide. Live. Build something from all of this. Not ruins. Not archives. A life. And a child, she said, without fear or hesitation. Morgan looked into her eyes. Do you want that? I want to choose, she said. Not be bred. Not be ordered. Choose. To give what was nearly taken from me. A future. He nodded. Then we do it together. Zyra looked down at the orb once more. Its glow had brightened. Responding. Recognizing. It had sensed alignment. Glyphs flickered across its surface. Consent. Bond. Continuance. Morgan took her hands again, lacing his fingers through hers. Not just holding her. Committing. Outside, the planet turned slowly, its sky deepening into twilight. The wind whispered through ancient vines, curling around stone and breath and promise. And beneath that sun, in a temple no longer lost, two lives became one. Not broken, not buried, but blooming together.